Esther Nadal asks, in the past I studied some Buddhism, particularly Zen. I've also recently started studying some traditional yoga and your lectures on Vedanta. Although I find some of the teachings of yoga practical, inspiring, and interesting, I hold a non-dualistic view of the universe, and I am very much drawn towards Vedanta. In your lectures, you emphasize that there is an important difference between Vedanta, yoga, and Sankhya. You also say that some aspects of yoga can be helpful at the beginning for the Vedantic seeker, and the Sankhya is the basis of yoga. I'd be very grateful if you could help me understand the difference and the similarities between all these philosophies, so that I can discern what tools of yoga are helpful to me without unknowingly getting out of the specific path of Vedanta.
All right, that's a heavily metaphysical question, but also practical. So here goes. What Esther is referring to are the darshanas, the systematic philosophies of Hinduism. In Hinduism, traditionally we speak of 6 darshanas. I have this voice in my head of my philosophy professor saying, Professor, I specifically remember Professor Parimal Patil at the Harvard philosophy department in one class saying, let us hear no more of 6 systems talk. That's the traditional way of talking about it, but he says let's not hear any more of it because it is problematic in certain ways. But anyway, for our purposes it will do. One way of looking at ancient Hindu philosophy is to look at the 6 systems. The Nyaya, the Vaisheshika, the Sankhya, the Yoga, the Purva Mimamsa and the Uttara Mimamsa. The Purva and Uttara means the earlier and the later. The Uttara Mimamsa is also called Vedanta, of which there are many schools, and the school which we are specifically talking about is Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Vedanta. Now the question is that I am sympathetic to the non-dual Vedantic worldview, but I have studied Zen Buddhism, I have studied Sankhya and Yoga. I like the yogic practices, and you have also said that Sankhya is the foundation of Advaita, then yoga practices are useful for Advaita. It's not just that I have just said it, that's part of classical Advaita Vedanta doctrine. That Sankhya constitutes the first step in Vedantic inquiry, and yogic meditation practices are very, very useful for Advaita Vedanta. Not just Advaita Vedanta, any kind of spiritual path. Yoga is basically the prototype, the epitome of all meditation practices. So here goes. One way of looking at it is that these 6 systems, you can divide them into 3 groups. One group, Nyaya Vaisheshika, another group, Sankhya and Yoga, and the other group is, the other pair is the Mimamsas. The Mimamsa literally means a reverential inquiry, Pujita Vichara, reverential inquiry into the texts. Now I will not delineate the systems, that will be like 6 systems, at least 6 classes to give an outline of what each is. But why these 3 groups? It's because these philosophies, the Nyaya and Vaisheshika, the Sankhya and Yoga, these are what are called Samana Tantra or sister philosophies. So is Purva Mimamsa and Uttara Mimamsa, but with an important difference. The Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, they get along very well together. They are sisters who are very friendly to be with each other. But the Purva Mimamsa and Uttara Mimamsa generally are sisters. They are sisters too, but they don't get along well with each other. They have huge conflicts, some huge conflicts between themselves. All right. The next point I want to make is that Sankhya and Yoga, being sister philosophies, or in Sanskrit Samana Tantra, they hold, there is very little disagreement between them. They have the same worldview. And what worldview is that? It's a very logical, very elegant worldview. We are awareness, consciousness, and everything else appears to us. So whatever appears to you, whatever you experience, this world, which we experience through our senses, which we experience through our scientific investigations, this world, including all the people and all the living beings in it and all the non-living things in it, from the tiniest particle to the largest galaxy and so on. This is the world. And then also our own body, our senses, our mind, the intellect, which we are using right now to say all these things, all of it, from the external world, from the farthest galaxy to this body, and indeed the subtle mind and intellect which we all take to be ourselves, all of that is not you, is not us really. All of that belongs to nature. In Sanskrit it is called, in Sankhya it is called Prakriti, nature. All of this is nature. Then what am I? I am consciousness. I am awareness. You are consciousness. You are awareness. This clear distinction between awareness and object. Under object falls all of nature. From physical nature up to subtle nature like mind and intellect. Everything. Whatever can be experienced, whatever can be objectified is nature, Prakriti. And that to which all experiences happen, you, I, we are consciousness. So this is the fundamental principle of the Sankhya worldview, that it is a dualistic worldview. Notice, finally there are two realities. Finally, there is consciousness and there is matter. There is consciousness, matter. Prakriti, which is nature, and Purusha, which is consciousness. In addition, Sankhya also says there are many Purushas, many consciousnesses, if I may so use that term. So we are all consciousness, but we are all different consciousness, individual, separate from each other. This is called Bahupurushavada, many consciousnesses, many souls, many Atmans, many selves. So this is the Sankhyan worldview. Very logical and elegant, because if you look at it, that's how we experience life. I am aware and I'm aware of stuff. That's life. That's life. What else is life? I'm aware and I'm aware of things, this, that, everything. Enjoyment, suffering, objects, body, other people. This is life. Now this goes against the Advaita, the final Advaitic understanding of non-duality. Advaita accepts this so far as it helps us to realize ourselves as pure consciousness. Sankhya helps us to distinguish ourselves from body and mind, from the personality, from the limited personality, and see ourselves as an impersonal consciousness, interacting with and through this body-mind. So we are this impersonal consciousness, also known as pure consciousness. Up to this, Vedanta is on board with Sankhya. And the Sankhyan analysis is very, very useful for Vedanta. Vedanta uses this analysis. In fact, what I teach sometimes, Drig, Drishya, Viveka, all of that is Sankhyan analysis basically. However, Vedanta goes further. It asks the further question, what is the relationship between consciousness and matter? What is the relationship between Purusha and Prakriti? Sankhya will say, I told you, they are different. You interact with it, but they are different from each other. Vedanta will, I will not say how, but it goes further using reasoning, Shruti, that is the Upanishadic testimony, reasoning, Yukti, and Anubhuti, experience, to show that they are not separate. They are not separate. They are not distinct. Ultimately, there is one underlying reality which appears as the knower and the known, as the subject and the object. And that reality is consciousness itself. So what you call nature and object is actually nothing apart from that reality. And how so? That is the whole of the Advaita Vedanta. We will not go into it, but this is the big, big distinction. Sankhya is dualistic, Advaita is monistic or non-dualistic. And how dualistic? Prakriti Purusha, consciousness and matter. How non-dualistic? Consciousness only. Consciousness only. Even matter is ultimately nothing but consciousness in the Advaitic worldview. Yoga. Yoga takes the Sankhyan worldview, and yoga develops extraordinary meditation techniques. Even the Buddha learned yoga. And Sankhya, if you see the descriptions of what he learned from his teachers, you will find some kind of proto-Sankhya, proto-yoga there, which later, of course, Buddha and his followers, Buddhists over thousands of years, developed into very sophisticated meditation techniques. So yoga is very famous for its meditation techniques. What Vedanta does is, of course, it rejects the dualistic worldview of yoga, which is the same as the Sankhyan worldview. Vedanta says, no, Prakriti and Purusha, matter and consciousness are not separate. They are one reality, which is consciousness itself. What about the yogic? So in Sankhya, it borrows the Sankhyan analysis as a preliminary. From yoga, what does Vedanta borrow? Vedanta borrows meditation. The method of training the attention. How you sit, how you breathe, how you withdraw your attention from the world, how you turn inwards, how you settle down and focus and then be absorbed in samadhi. These techniques are universally applicable. Anybody who has a mind, a psychology, can apply these techniques. And so can Vedantists. Only Vedantists adapt it for realizing the truth. You get a realization of the truth through Vedantic hearing and reasoning, and then to make it a living reality, to assimilate this truth, to transform this personality using this realization. That is what Vedanta does, using yogic meditation. So this is the difference. And the Brahma Sutras say, Etena yoga pratyuktaha, by this yoga is set aside. So what is set aside by Vedanta? Yoga as a philosophy, not yoga as a practice. The dualistic side of yoga is set aside. Specifically that matter and consciousness are separate realities? No, ultimately not. Also that there are many consciousnesses? No, ultimately there is one consciousness. And you are that. Good.